Previously, I made a video talking about the first 3 episodes of The Boys Season 4. In said video, I talked about how I felt that those first episodes didn't really set the stage for the season well enough. It felt too repetitive of what came before it, and it felt like every character had some random thing to do instead of being involved in the main plot. My biggest gripe is that I felt like everything happening didn't have a proper through line. Specifically, every individual arc that the characters had didn't really build into one another, and the main plot line didn't have a clear direction. Now the season has fully come out, I've seen all the episodes, and I wanted to come back and expand on my points now that I know everything that happens. I know I said I would compare it to Season 3, but I just want to focus more on how I feel about this season, so I won't be comparing it too much. Let's just get started. What I want to do first is clear up some of the things that I was saying in the first video. I got a lot of comments on that video debating what I was saying, and that's awesome, genuinely. I love having these discussions, and I love seeing what you guys think. The problem is, some of the people I was debating with were taking the wrong point from what I was saying. My point was that I felt like the characters this season were disconnected from the plot, and there wasn't a clear direction for where all of these arcs were going. For example, Frenchie's arc about repenting for his past murders was entirely disconnected from the soup revolution that was being spearheaded by Sage and Homelander. Some people took this as me saying that the soup civil war wasn't a clear plot thread. No, I understood that Homelander and Sage wanted to wage war. Others thought that I meant that the soup war wasn't properly built up to. Again, that's not what I was saying. I admit I could have worded my point better, but what I actually meant is that each character and each individual plot line doesn't all work together, and what I really wanted was for the plot to introduce something that ties it all together. However, knowing how the season ends, I can safely say that there is nothing that pays this off. Kimiko starts the season looking to confront her past or whatever, so she ends up going to a Shining Light clubhouse and murdering a bunch of them. In the process, she finds this woman who she recognizes, but Frenchie shows up guns blazing and ruins it. So then, in episode 4, they show up again and attack both Kimiko and Huey, and we get the reveal that Kimiko sold this woman out to Shining Light and got her involved in it. Okay, cool. I wonder where this plotline is going. Oops, silly me, I shouldn't have gotten invested because it isn't in any of the following episodes. It has a significant amount of screen time in the first half of the season, but then nothing happens until Kimiko and Frenchie have a conversation in episode 7. Shining Light was actively pursuing Kimiko for attacking them. Why do they suddenly stop for half a season? And God only knows how it ties into the soup revolution, because clearly the writers don't. Everybody has their own individual plot lines that don't tie into anything. Frenchie is dealing with the guilt of his past, so much so that he turns himself into the police and isn't in episode 6 at all. Butcher is quite literally repeating his arc from last season, except this time we get cameos from Becca and Joe Kessler, who I will talk about in more detail later. Huey has been doing fuck all until episode 6, which, oh my god, I'll talk about that too. My point isn't that there's nothing happening, and it's not that there isn't a main plot. It's that there are so many plots that don't work with each other, and they're each fighting for screen time in a season that desperately needs something cohesive. Here's a comparison with Season 3. I mentioned this in my first video, but this is genuinely something that works so well in the third one compared to this season. Season 3 had a plotline that ran from episodes 1 through 8, and even though it was wrapped up poorly, it was still consistent, and everything played into it. We start out with the boys working for Huey, who is trying to fight Vought properly. However, his entire worldview is shattered when he finds out that Newman, his boss, is the soup mass murderer who blew up Congress in Season 2. Meanwhile, Butcher has been meeting with Maeve for intel, and she brings him the plot of the season. First, she introduces the Soldier Boy plot, revealing that Vought covered up his death and that he was actually killed by a superweapon from the Russians. Then, she reveals Temp V, the drug that Butcher and Huey use throughout the season. So, in episode 1, we're given the main plot, and the rest of the season expands on that. Episode 2 has Butcher going around trying to get info on what really happened to Soldier Boy, which leads him to Mallory in episode 3, which leads them to Russia in episode 4. Then, when they release Soldier Boy, Butcher, Huey, and MM go after him, which leads to the rest of the season where Butcher, Huey, and Soldier Boy are going around getting revenge on the members of Soldier Boy's team. The character arcs all played into this central plotline. Huey is pulled down to Butcher's level due to Starlight's arc and his own. Homelander is fucking around with Starlight and threatening her, and Huey feels powerless to protect her and do anything because of the Newman reveal. So, he's dragged down to Butcher's level where he takes Temp V to feel some sort of power in his life. Butcher was also close to moving on, but he's dragged back down because of Huey. Frenchie and Kimiko's arcs are still tied in because even though it's kinda rushed, they happen as a result of the shit that the boys are doing. Kimiko loses her powers to Soldier Boy, Frenchie is pulled back into working for Lil Nina, etc. So as far as you look, everything that happens in Season 3 is actually supported by the main Soldier Boy plot. If you look at Season 4, none of it is. The characters are all doing jack shit and get involved in the main plot sporadically. Anyways, now I want to look at some of the character arcs more in depth and talk a bit about what works and what doesn't. First, I want to look at A-Train because he has been given a lot of focus this season. His arc is coming off the heels of what happened in Season 3, which I actually really liked. This season, MM reaches out to A-Train and gets him to be an informant for the team. This leads to A-Train getting some real development. He hates the movie that Vought has him doing, he hates everything that Homelander and Sage are doing, and he starts being seen as an actual hero. He saves Huey, Huey forgives him, he saves MM, and for the first time, he's seen doing a save that was unscripted. He's actually being a real hero. And this arc for A-Train works really well. Except for when it doesn't. See, when episode 6 came out, I saw everyone talking about how good the scene of A-Train being recognized was, and when I saw the individual clip, I couldn't help but to agree. On its own, this is a really nice scene, and I love what it means for the character. However, episode 6 is an utter shit show of an episode, and the fact that this scene is placed in between scenes of Huey being tortured and Homelander's hunt for war really just sours the moment. It's a good moment that's ruined by being in a piece of horrible television. Other than that though, A-Train has consistently been the best part of this season. Anyways, I'd like to focus more on Butcher because I have a good amount to say about him and how he's been handled this season. As I mentioned in my first video, his arc feels so repetitive of what came before it. From the first 3 episodes, you can see the same sort of ideas popping up. Butcher wants to honor his deal with Becca and take care of Ryan, but there's someone who's acting as the devil on his shoulder trying to push him down again. This time though, Butcher has consistently been making good choices. He tries to make a deal with Newman, but decides not to fuck over Huey. He considers drugging Ryan, but decides to actually level with him and try to bond. He defies Kessler and tells the team about the potential of a soup genocide. Time and time again this season, Butcher has been shown to actually be making some good choices, in between his more rash and brutal ones. But then the finale fucks it all up and pushes him to the complete opposite end of Homelander, and I can't help but feel like it's not earned. The entire season, Butcher is sticking with the team, not fucking them over, going against Kessler and his genocidal ideations, only to be completely won over by Ryan killing Mallory, something which he could obviously tell was coming because he himself was trying to stop Mallory from pushing Ryan so hard. But it doesn't feel earned because Ryan did this in episode 2, and he told Butcher about it. In that instance, Butcher tried to support him. I know that Mallory and Butcher had more of a relationship, so I know that Butcher would be hurt by this, but he managed to support Ryan even with what happened to Becca. Somehow, the love of his life dying wasn't enough to turn him away from Ryan, but Mallory was? You can see that Ryan wasn't happy about this, but this is enough for Butcher to completely turn away from everything he had been working towards this season, and decide that Kessler was right. It pisses me off to no end. On top of that, Mallory dumping everything on Ryan felt so out of character. She hasn't been in this season enough to justify her panicking and dropping all of this at once. Had she actually been in more than 2 scenes, there could have been something to show why she feels like she needs to do this. Instead, the writers force her to do this to get her killed and push Butcher over the edge. Also, this just means that Butcher repeated his arc from last season, but instead of it happening in 3 episodes, it happened in 8. Season 3 had Butcher trying to be good, but eventually succumbing to his darkness by episode 3. This season had 7 episodes of him trying to be good, then one thing turns him into a genocidal maniac. Butcher has had some good moments and interesting things put into his story, but, and this is a big but, I can't shake how weird some of the writing choices have been, and while I'm not a writer, I have brainstormed a couple ideas that I personally think would work better. So, here's the deal. This isn't exclusive to Butcher, but a big problem that I have this season is the way they've been trying to retcon a lot of shit into people's pasts, especially things that are big enough to warrant being shown on screen. The time gap between seasons 3 and 4 is used to arbitrarily set up a bunch of dominoes that conveniently start falling at the start of this season. Colin and Frenchie get together off-screen, which ends up being the entire setup for Frenchie's arc this season. Them getting together is something that we should have seen. Doing this off-screen is a terrible way to set it up. And there's no payoff. Just like with Kamiko's story, Colin leaves after episode 4. Annie's abortion is also big enough that it shouldn't have been something that's just revealed to us midway through the season. And in episode 7, it's randomly revealed that Huey kept the Starlight suit, and that reveal comes from Annie's mother. These reveals come out of nowhere from the wrong characters. It feels like the writers used the 6-month time gap as a way to add in a bunch of quote-unquote big reveals, but they don't work because there isn't a basis for them. These storylines are good on paper, but come on, they're just throwing shit at us with no proper setup. The biggest offender of this is Joe Kessler, who shows up in the first episode talking about how Butcher saved his ass during a deployment. Now, yes, this is technically a retcon, but it's fine because we know that Butcher served, and of course, there are old pals he would have made during his time there. But no, we can't have a reasonable retcon this season, so of course, Kessler is a hallucination, and we're left to wonder why the fuck he's so important that Butcher's mind conjured him up. I also think that the twist of Kessler being a hallucination doesn't actually land because it's way too fucking obvious. People were calling it out since the first 3 episodes dropped, and while having a predictable twist isn't really terrible, it's just pretty lame when the big reveal happens. Case in point, in episode 6, when Kessler tells Becca to shut the fuck up, it doesn't hit as an oh shit twist, it's just like, oh, okay, I guess they're doing this. I feel like the twist could have had more of an impact if we didn't see Becca beforehand, and this was the change that I was talking about. The fact that he was hallucinating Becca tipped everyone off that Kessler might not be real, but Becca's presence wasn't actually needed because the previous seasons built up Huey as the angel on Butcher's shoulder. This season forgets that though, because there isn't one truly good scene between Huey and Butcher, and it's sad because it was clearly the heart and soul of the show in previous seasons. I think that a better way to tie everything together is to have Huey and Butcher be together for most of the runtime. Huey can act as the replacement for Becca, while Kessler can act as the devil, and that way, the reveal that Kessler isn't real would actually be surprising. But no matter what, you can't change the fact that Kessler isn't a tangible devil on his shoulder because we know nothing about the real Kessler and his relationship with Butcher. I also don't particularly like how Butcher took V off-screen. This entire plotline between him and Kessler is a direct result of that choice, and I think that, again, it's really lazy to use this time jump to start this plotline off-screen. And the reveal is that he took it from Frenchie, but where did Frenchie get it from? I guess maybe it was the V left over from season 3, but how would Butcher have known about it? All in all, I feel that despite having some good ideas, the biggest problem with a lot of the character arcs is the execution. Too many of the big moments or setup for these arcs happen off-screen, and then we're expected to care about what's happening when we've been dropped into the middle of it. And then, one last thing about Butcher. In episode 7, Kessler reveals that Butcher cheated on Becca, which feels really... I don't know. I saw some discourse on Twitter when the episode came out, but I feel like this pushes him a bit too far in the wrong direction. People like to say, oh, Butcher has killed so many people, he chopped off Samir's leg, yada yada, but cheating is too far? No, cheating isn't the worst thing that Butcher has done morally. However, cheating on Becca is the worst thing the writers could have done for his character. His entire motivation up to this point is that he loves his wife. He spends a whole season trying to avenge her, then trying to find and save her. Then the beginning of season 3 is spent honoring her, and this season he wants to save Ryan. Who the fuck thought that making him cheat on her was a good plot point? She quite literally is the angel on his shoulder this season. I don't know, this feels so cheap. I can't see him doing it. I just can't believe they would go in this direction. And I really hate that Kessler is the face of this plot progression when there's no basis for their relationship. The major thing this season is that the boys are going around and gathering intel. It happens in basically every episode, and I can't help but feel like it's all practically useless. In episode 1, they fail to kill Newman and only find out that her daughter is a soup. They go to TruthCon in episode 2 in an attempt to spy on Sage, and there they quite literally learn nothing. They try to spy on Newman again in episode 3 and learn nothing. In episode 5, they try to get the soup virus, but they use the last dose to escape from the farm, something I'm definitely coming back to later, but they leave with nothing. At the very least, Butcher kidnaps Samir to get more doses, but come on. Episode 6 leads them to Tech Night, where Huey gets tortured and sexually assaulted, but they do learn that Homelander and Sage are using Tech Night's prisons as internment camps for anyone who dares to defy their takeover. I can't help but feel like their intel sessions are so fucking useless, because for the entire season, they're several steps behind what Homelander and co are doing. They spend almost every episode trying to gain intel, and almost every time, they learn jack shit. It makes me feel like the team is incompetent, which feels wrong considering how good they used to be. In the comments of my last video, people said that the boys being useless was all in an attempt to showcase how MM isn't capable of leading the team, and that it has to go back to Butcher. However, MM stays as the leader down to the finale, and he's honestly not that bad at it. I just think that in an attempt to showcase how Homelander is making his way to achieving his goals, the writers just had to make the team less competent. I know that it gets recontextualized as part of Sage's plan, but that brings up the whole discussion about how super thinking works as a power. At the beginning of the season, Sage actually has plans and theories that work well and don't just serve as her being able to predict how people will act. However, once we get to episode 7, she says that A-Train leaking shit has been part of her plan, and he leaked exactly what she wanted him to, which makes no sense, cause how would she know exactly what he would give the boys? Once again, super thinking succumbs to the pitfalls of being premonitions rather than actual intelligence. And on the topic of going around and gathering intel, it blows my mind that in the season where practically every episode is spent gathering intel, there isn't a scene where Butcher goes to Godolkin and finds out about the soup virus. Here's the thing, the showrunner and actors have said that you don't need to watch Gen V to understand this season, and to an extent they're not wrong. The show does attempt to explain the virus, but, and this is a big but, the show doesn't do enough to explain it. So, while the production team wasn't wrong, they also weren't right. See, Butcher mentions it in the first episode, but it's almost a throwaway line as it doesn't mean anything until episode 5. That is, when Butcher tells the team about the virus, and that he went to Godolkin to get it. I'm not saying that I have a problem with the interconnected universe, I just think that this season should have had a scene where Butcher goes to Godolkin. This is the intel that the boys should have been following, not whatever irrelevant bullshit they've been doing this season. It's so redundant. Now, before we get to the end of the video, I just have to talk some shit about the finale. Firecracker's heart palpitations serve no purpose to the plot. By the end of the episode, she's back to normal, and I have no idea what they were trying to do with this. Sage gets fired in episode 7, and then just shows up to Vought Tower in the finale. It's then revealed that the entire season has gone according to her plan, and she's just back in the 7 now. I admit, the idea of framing the president for killing Newman is actually a dope plot point, but Sage showing up and being like, this was all part of the plan, feels just shoehorned into the episode. It comes out of nowhere. Then, there's all the stuff I mentioned with Butcher, which feels like it's too much of a rug pull. As I already talked about, I don't feel like Butcher's turn feels earned, so when he turns up and kills a Newman, it feels just as unearned. I will commend them for actually committing to it, because killing Newman was an established plot this season, but I kind of hate how it happened. These things develop too fast. After a season full of nothing happening, everything happens this episode, and none of it feels earned because it isn't what the rest of the season was building up to. Newman constantly backed Homelander despite never needing to be in that position. Case in point, in episode 6, Homelander was breaking down because Sage wasn't there to answer questions for him, and Newman stepped in for no reason. But then, we're expected to feel like Newman going to Huey for help is earned. She broke Stan Edgar out of jail. What happened to him? He wasn't shown again since episode 5. But it happened! And it's not the only thing that isn't addressed here. Ashley gave herself a dose of Compound V less than halfway through the episode, and it isn't touched on again. After Ryan kills Mallory, he's gone. Annie's powers start working at the end of the episode for no reason. They try to shoehorn in the idea that in order to start beating Homelander, they need to start acting human, which was the fucking lesson that Huey had to learn last season. He attributes this to his dad, but none of that came from his dad! I can't. This finale did nothing to tie anything together. All I can say is that the entire time I was waiting for something that would make everything feel like it worked together, and now that it's over, I'm still left hanging. Nothing got tied up neatly. Nothing felt satisfying. No arc had a payoff that was sufficient. I came out of this season with less than I had before it started. Anyways, to end this off, I want to briefly discuss a few inconsistencies that I noticed and just generally have some criticisms of. Firstly, the writers can't seem to keep Newman's power level consistent. In Gen V episode 7, Newman meets up with Marie and reveals that her powers are blood-based. She does this by using Marie's knife to cut open her hand. However, in the season 4 premiere of The Boys, Huey splashes her with acid and it does nothing. Then, Butcher shoots her and it does nothing. Why did the knife hurt her? When did she become invulnerable? Also, in episode 5, the boys, Stan Edgar, Newman, and her husband are all in a barn, and they're debating whether or not they should use the last dose of the virus to escape, or if they should just book it and try to survive. Earlier in the episode, Newman blows the head off a beat-up chicken. However, during this debate, the fact that she can kill every beat-up sheep is not brought up once. Now, I've thought about possible rebuttals. Some people might say that using her powers to kill those 5 or so sheep would be overworking her. It's too many heads to pop all at once. Are you sure about that? I counted 14 deaths in this scene, all happening in less than 2 minutes, all of which are Newman. I honestly can't think of any other reason they wouldn't do this other than to manufacture the drama of having to use the final dose of the virus. So it's just fucking lazy writing. Then there's the fact that this season feels a lot more disrespectful and grotesque than the others. The human centipede shit, web weaver, everything they've done with Huey in episodes 6 and 7, all just feels gross for the sake of being gross. At the very least, the termite scene in season 3 was showing us why termite needed to be stopped. It gave us a sense of what this guy was doing and why he's dangerous. What's-his-face with the human centipede shit was just doing it for the sake of it. It was fucking nasty, and it was the first time that I've ever come close to throwing up because of something in this show. Webweaver is nasty and just so uncomfortable in every scene he's in, and everything with Huey just felt disgusting. He gets sexually assaulted 3 times in 3 episodes, and episodes 7 and 8 do absolutely nothing with Huey's trauma. In fact, Huey is just fucking tortured this season for no reason. He kills his dad, gets tortured and almost mutilated by Tech Knight, and gets raped by a shapeshifter assassin, and none of this is properly dealt with. The showrunner even said that it was funny, and it leaves me feeling dirty for watching it. Huey gets taken advantage of time and time again, and then gets shit on for it in the finale. Truth be told, this season is mediocre at best. The episodes themselves aren't written poorly, except episode 6, it's a fucking disgrace. But each episode is filled with bits of lazy writing that just drag the season down. As a whole, this is undoubtedly the worst season of the show, and it feels more like a transitional season from the last one into the final one. This one, more than anything, feels like the writers have run out of ideas. It feels like nothing has actually progressed, and it's just not as enjoyable as everything that came before it. I'm going to be rewatching all 4 seasons again soon, so maybe my opinion will change upon getting all the information again. But as it stands right now, Season 4 has felt like a fucking waste of time at best, and just flat out disrespectful at worst. Thank you all for watching. I'd like to hear your opinions in the comments, and I'm open to debating everything I've said here, so I look forward to that. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye!